My leg is stuck in the stones. Cowboy, please save me. I'll do anything, even bear you a child. Maria Alvarez had woken up early that morning, long before the sun pushed its warm light over the hills. The air was cool, and a soft mist floated above the fields like a thin blanket. She loved mornings like this, quiet, calm, and filled with the kind of peace only wide open land could give. Maria worked on a small ranch just outside a tiny town where everyone knew everyone. Her days were usually filled with simple routines, feeding the horses, checking the fences, and helping with whatever else needed to be done. Nothing dramatic had ever happened to her out in the countryside, and she believed nothing ever would. She thought of the land as a friend, steady, predictable, and always gentle with her. So when she set out that morning to deliver a small bag of supplies to a neighboring ranch, she hesitated for only a moment before choosing the shorter path through the ravine. She had walked that path dozens of times. It was a little narrow, and sometimes rocks fell after a storm, but she had never had trouble before. She believed today would be no different. She hummed a soft tune as she walked, enjoying the sound of birds waking up and the playful wind brushing against her cheeks. The ravine always looked a little mysterious. Tall stone walls rose on both sides, their surfaces rough and uneven. Some areas were covered in moss, and small plants grew from cracks where water trickled after rain. Maria liked seeing the shapes the shadows made when sunlight slipped in between the rocks. Sometimes she pretended the shapes belonged to old stories, giants, dragons, or wandering spirits, but nothing dangerous, only friendly creatures that watched her walk by. It made the path feel alive. As she stepped deeper into the ravine, she felt the ground shift slightly under her feet. Little stones rolled forward with her steps, making soft, clicking sounds. She didn't think anything of it. Loose stones were normal in that area. She kept walking, her bag lightly bouncing against her hip. The path curved a little to the left, and as always, she bent her head because the tall stones on her right side leaned inward. She was used to it, and she continued at the same steady pace. Then she felt the ground tremble just a little more, nothing extreme, only enough to make her pause. She turned her head, expecting to see a rabbit or maybe a stray goat running across the top part of the ravine. She saw nothing. Everything was still. She waited, listening closely. The only sound was the soft whisper of wind moving through the narrow gap between the stone walls. Maria took a slow breath, convincing herself it was her imagination, and she took another careful step. That was when the stones shifted again, this time louder, a sort of grinding sound like heavy pebbles sliding against each other. She froze. A prickle of tension ran up her arms. She glanced up at the slanted wall above her. A few small rocks tumbled down, bouncing harmlessly near her feet. She moved back, but before she could decide which direction to go, the stone beneath her right foot gave way, collapsing under her weight. Maria gasped as her leg slipped into a narrow gap. The stones around her shifted more quickly now. She grabbed at the nearest wall, fingers digging into rough edges, trying to steady herself. But the ground continued to move. A cluster of medium-sized rocks slid toward her, clicking and rolling before settling right onto her trapped leg. The pressure wasn't sharp at first, only heavy, but it made her breath hitch. She instinctively tried to pull her leg out, but the stones pressed tighter as she moved, sealing her leg firmly in place. She tried again, gently this time, hoping the rocks would loosen if she stayed calm. They didn't. Her boot was wedged, and the stones held it like a clamp. Maria's heart began to beat faster, each thump echoing in her ears. She looked around, searching for something, anything, that could help her lift the stones. There was nothing nearby except more rocks, uneven ground, and the high stone walls that suddenly felt far too close. The sky visible above seemed smaller, like a distant rectangle of blue trapped between the walls. She tried shifting her body, bending forward to push at the stones with both hands. The rocks didn't budge. They felt heavier than anything she had ever lifted, as if the earth itself had decided to sit on her leg. Her hands shook slightly. She pressed her palm against her forehead, trying to stop herself from panicking. She told herself to breathe. "Stay calm," she whispered softly, though her voice trembled. "Someone will come, just stay calm." But the ravine was quiet, too quiet. People rarely passed through this path. Most folks preferred the longer, safer route around the hill. Maria had chosen this one because it saved time, not realizing this would be the day the land would shift beneath her feet. She tried again to free herself, pushing with all her strength. Pain shot through her leg this time, a dull, deep ache that made her stop immediately. She pressed her lips together, refusing to cry out. The pain wasn't terrible yet, but she could tell it would grow worse the more she struggled. She needed a smarter way, not just force. Maria reached for her bag to see if anything inside could help her. Rope, water, a small cloth, nothing useful for moving rocks. She ran her fingers through her hair, frustrated and scared. The reality of her situation slowly sank in. She was stuck, truly stuck, and if no one came along, she had no way to free herself. Her breathing grew uneven. She felt heat rising in her chest, spreading into her throat. It wasn't just fear, it was the helplessness of realizing she could not solve this problem alone. She had always been strong and independent. She had fixed fences alone, tamed spirited horses, and carried hay bales twice her size without asking for help. But now she needed someone, anyone. She cupped her hands around her mouth and called out. Her voice echoed between the tall stone walls, bouncing back at her as if mocking her hope. She yelled again, louder this time. The sound stretched through the ravine, but there was no answer. The silence that followed felt heavier than the stones trapping her. Minutes passed. Maybe longer, she couldn't tell. Time felt strange when fear took hold. She rested her head against the cool stone beside her, letting the chill ease the heat in her face. She closed her eyes and listened for signs of life, footsteps, hooves, a voice, anything that meant she wasn't alone. But all she heard was wind. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. The sun was rising higher now, and the shadows inside the ravine shifted, changing shape. Some areas grew brighter while others darkened. Her trapped leg felt warm, not from the sun but from pressure and strain. She tried once more to wiggle her toes inside her boot. They moved a little, which gave her a tiny bit of comfort. At least the circulation wasn't fully cut off. She spoke to herself again, trying to keep her thoughts steady. "Someone will pass by," she said softly. "Maybe a hiker, maybe a rancher, maybe—" Her voice faded. She didn't know who, she didn't know when, but she had to believe it. The idea of being stuck there all day made her stomach twist. The path wasn't dangerous under normal circumstances, but being unable to move made every sound suspicious and every change in the air unsettling. She felt small in the massive stone corridor, like a tiny figure drifting in a place built for giants. She decided to try calling again. She took a deep breath, gathering all the strength in her chest. "Hello," she cried. "Is anyone out there? I need help." Her voice cracked, but she didn't care. She yelled again and again until her throat felt dry, still no response. She lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. A single tear slipped down her cheek and she quickly brushed it away. She didn't want fear to consume her. She reminded herself that she wasn't weak. She was only human, and humans sometimes faced moments they couldn't handle alone. This was one of those moments. She looked up once more at the strip of blue sky and tried to imagine someone passing by. Maybe they would be riding. Maybe they would hear her calls. Maybe they would come soon. She held on to that hope as tightly as she could. The ravine remained silent, but she didn't stop listening. Every rustle, every whisper of wind, every falling pebble made her lift her head with a spark of hope. She prayed one of those sounds would soon be footsteps, the sound of someone coming to help her before the sunlight faded and the cold night returned. She didn't know who would come, she didn't know when, but she knew she needed someone. And she hoped with all her heart that help was already on its way. Luke Carver had started his morning like any other. He saddled his horse, Dusty, just after sunrise, and rode out to check the far end of the land he often helped look after. Luke wasn't the owner of any big ranch. He worked from place to place, offering help wherever it was needed. Most people trusted him because he never made trouble, never spoke more than necessary, and always showed up when someone needed a hand. Even when no one asked, he quietly found ways to fix broken gates, carry heavy feed bags, or guide lost animals back home. That morning, the sky was painted with soft orange light, and the wind carried the smell of grass warmed by sunlight. Luke breathed in deeply, enjoying the peaceful start of the day. He guided Dusty along a familiar trail, one that curved gently through rolling hills and scattered patches of wildflowers. Luke didn't plan on taking the ravine path. He usually avoided it because it was narrow and often cluttered with loose stones. But something felt different that morning, and he didn't know why his heart insisted on riding closer to that direction. Dusty seemed restless too. The horse kept lifting his head, ears turning as if listening to something far away. Luke patted Dusty's neck, thinking maybe the horse sensed a change in weather, but the sky was clear. Everything seemed fine. Still, Dusty moved with unusual attention, almost like he was following a quiet call that Luke couldn't hear. After riding for nearly an hour, Luke slowed near a small bend in the trail. Something faint reached his ears, a sound so soft he almost thought he imagined it. He paused, leaning forward slightly, listening. It came again, barely there, like a distant cry carried by the wind. Luke straightened in his saddle. "Did you hear that, boy?" he asked softly. Dusty flicked his ears and took a careful step forward, as if confirming the sound. Luke wasn't the type who ignored someone in need. He gently nudged Dusty in the direction of the noise. The closer they rode, the clearer the sound became. It wasn't the sharp cry of an animal. It wasn't the echo of wind brushing against stone. It was a human voice, weak, strained, almost trembling. The sound drew him toward the ravine. Dusty hesitated at the edge, sensing the tight pathway and the strange tension in the air. Luke stroked the horse's shoulder, calming him before guiding him down the narrow entrance. The walls rose on both sides, tall and rugged, and the shadows shifted as they moved deeper inside. Luke kept his eyes and ears focused, searching for the person calling out. "Hello," he called gently, not wanting to startle anyone. His voice traveled through the ravine and returned to him in a soft echo. For a moment there was silence. Then the faint answer came, "Help, please." The words trembled as if wrapped in fear and exhaustion. Luke dismounted quickly and led Dusty forward on foot, stepping around loose stones. He rounded a small bend, and that was when he saw her, Maria Alvarez, though he didn't know her name yet. She was sitting on the ground, her back against the stone wall, her face pale but hopeful when she saw him. Her right leg was pinned under several medium-sized stones, and she looked like she had been stuck there for quite some time. Relief washed over her features the moment her eyes met his. "Thank goodness, someone finally came," she whispered, voice weak from calling out for so long. Luke approached slowly, wanting her to feel safe. "Are you hurt anywhere besides your leg?" he asked kindly. Maria shook her head. "Just my leg, I can't move it. I tried everything." Her voice cracked and she looked embarrassed. "I didn't think something like this could happen." Luke crouched beside her, examining the stones with gentle hands. He didn't touch her leg yet. He didn't want to cause pain. "It's all right," he said calmly. "We'll get you out. You're not alone anymore." Maria's eyes filled with emotion. Being alone had frightened her more than the trapped leg, and hearing those words made her chest loosen a little. She took a shaky breath, grateful for the comfort he gave even before helping her physically. Luke studied the arrangement of the stones carefully. They weren't huge, but they were heavy enough that lifting them by hand would be difficult. More importantly, they were wedged in a way that made moving one affect the others. If he shifted the wrong stone, it could put more pressure on her leg or make the situation worse. Luke was cautious by nature, and he wanted to make sure everything he did was steady and safe. As he worked, Maria watched him quietly. His calm presence soothed her nerves. She didn't know who he was, but something about him made her feel she could trust him entirely. His hands moved with steady confidence, and though he didn't talk much, each word he spoke had gentle reassurance in it. At one point, she felt overwhelmed by relief and fear mixing together, and the words slipped out of her mouth before she could stop them. "Please, save me. I'll do anything at all. I'd even give you a family if you want. Just don't leave me here." She hadn't meant it literally. She was scared, tired, and desperate for safety. Sometimes fear makes people say things that come from the deepest, most fragile part of their hearts. And in that moment, she just wanted to feel like someone would stay by her side until she was safe. Luke paused, not because the words bothered him, but because he understood the fear behind them. He lifted his eyes to meet hers, offering a comforting look that held neither judgment nor misunderstanding. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. "I'm here to help because it's the right thing. You don't need to offer anything in return." Maria felt heat rise to her face. She lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the emotional outburst. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I didn't mean it like that. I was just scared." "I know," Luke replied, his tone warm and sincere. "Anyone would feel the same in your situation." His voice held no shame, no discomfort, only empathy. The moment passed softly, replaced by quiet understanding. Maria relaxed, letting out a slow breath she had been holding. Luke returned his focus to the stones, setting a plan in his mind. He decided to use Dusty and his rope to help shift the heavier stones without pulling too harshly. He explained each step to Maria before doing anything, wanting her to feel comfortable and aware. She listened gratefully, relieved that he cared enough to include her in the process instead of rushing through it. He secured the rope around one of the larger stones and guided Dusty a short distance away. The horse responded to Luke's calm voice and slow gestures, pulling gently as instructed. The stone shifted just enough for Luke to move it further by hand, making sure not to let it roll toward her. Each movement required patience, and some stones took longer than others. Maria winced occasionally when pressure changed around her trapped leg, but Luke immediately stopped each time she reacted, checking to make sure she wasn't in too much discomfort. During the pauses, they talked softly. Maria told him about the ranch she worked on, how she had grown up around horses and open fields, and how she often walked the ravine path because it felt like a shortcut she could trust. Luke shared small pieces of his life too, how he traveled from ranch to ranch offering help, how he preferred quiet mornings, and how he believed every person deserved kindness when they were in need. Their conversation wasn't dramatic. It was simple, warm, and surprisingly peaceful despite the situation. The sweetness of their shared words made the air feel lighter. After nearly an hour of careful work, Luke finally managed to shift the last stone enough for Maria to slowly pull her leg free. She gasped softly, not from pain, but from overwhelming relief. She leaned back, eyes closing for a moment, letting her body calm down. "You did it," she said quietly, filled with gratitude. "Thank you, truly." Luke helped her sit more comfortably and checked her leg. It was sore and slightly swollen, but not injured in a serious way. She could move her foot, which was a good sign. Still, she wouldn't be able to walk far. "Can you stand?" Luke asked. Maria shook her head. "I don't think so yet." "That's all right," he said. "I'll get you out of here." He gently picked her up, careful not to make her leg bend too much. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders lightly, still feeling embarrassed but also safe for the first time that day. Luke carried her toward Dusty, who waited patiently. As he helped her onto the horse, she looked at him with soft, grateful eyes. "You didn't have to stop, but you did," Luke smiled faintly. "If someone calls for help, you answer. That's just how the world should work." Maria held onto the saddle as Luke guided Dusty out of the ravine on foot, making sure the horse's steps stayed smooth and gentle. For the first time since the accident, the sky didn't feel like a small rectangle above her. It felt wide and comforting again. And though her leg throbbed a little, her heart felt lighter, warmed by the kindness of the stranger who came when she needed someone most. And without either of them saying it aloud, something quietly changed between them. Something small, tender, and full of possibility. Luke walked beside Dusty, guiding the horse slowly and carefully along the uneven ground of the ravine. Maria sat on the saddle with one hand gripping the horn tightly and the other resting lightly on Dusty's mane for balance. Every few steps, Luke glanced up at her to make sure she was comfortable. Even though her leg hurt, she forced a small smile each time their eyes met, letting him know she was holding on. The path out of the ravine wasn't very long, but it felt endless to her. The narrow walls seemed to stretch out, twisting and turning as if trying to keep her inside. She could still hear the echoes of her earlier cries bouncing around in her memory. But now Luke's steady presence softened the fear that lingered inside her chest. She felt safe, even in the uncomfortable stillness of the stone corridor. When they reached wider ground, Luke stopped Dusty and helped Maria down gently. He found a flat patch of grass nearby and guided her to sit. The fresh air outside the ravine felt like a gift, warm, open, and full of life. Birds chirped from nearby trees, and the sun finally touched her face fully, soothing the tension in her body. Luke knelt beside her to check her leg again. He didn't touch without asking. He always waited for her to nod before he examined the swollen area. She appreciated that about him, his care, his patience, and the way he seemed to treat her comfort as if it mattered deeply. "It doesn't look broken," he said softly. "But it's strained and bruised. You shouldn't put weight on it yet." Maria sighed, both relieved and frustrated. "I'm glad it's not worse, but I hate feeling helpless." Luke shook his head with a gentle smile. "You're not helpless. You held on until help arrived. That takes a lot of strength." His words warmed her heart. She looked down at her hands and let out a small breath. "I still can't believe this happened. One moment I was walking, and the next, everything just collapsed under me." "Life does that sometimes," Luke replied. "It surprises us in ways we don't expect." As they talked, he reached for his water canteen and offered it to her. Maria took a slow sip, then another, feeling the cool water refresh her dry throat. She hadn't realized how thirsty she'd become while calling out for help. After she drank, Luke sat beside her on the grass. The moment felt quiet and peaceful, as if the world was giving them space to breathe after everything that had happened. Maria watched him from the corner of her eye. He looked thoughtful, calm, and grounded, like someone who carried kindness naturally. His hat shaded his eyes, but when he glanced toward her, she saw a gentle sincerity in them. "Luke," she said softly, "why were you even near the ravine today? Most people avoid it." He shrugged lightly. "Dusty seemed restless. I followed his lead." "Maybe he heard you before I did." Maria reached out and touched the horse's neck. Dusty pressed his head toward her hand as if acknowledging their shared moment. She smiled softly. "Then thank you, Dusty. You helped save me." The horse gave a small snort, almost like a playful response. Luke stood after a moment, brushing dust from his jeans. "We should get you to a doctor. They'll know how to take care of your leg." Maria nodded slowly. "I know, but can we rest here a little longer? My leg feels too stiff to move again right away." "Of course," Luke said without hesitation. "We'll move whenever you're ready." They sat in the warm sunlight, surrounded by the quiet hum of nature. Maria leaned back on her hands and lifted her face to the sky. The earlier fear had drained her energy, leaving her tired but strangely peaceful. Luke stayed close enough to help if needed, but he didn't crowd her personal space. He let her set the pace. After a long moment, Maria spoke again. "Luke, when I was trapped, I thought nobody would find me. I called out until my voice hurt. I felt small and forgotten." Luke listened carefully, giving her the space to share her feelings. "I know that feeling," he said quietly after a moment. "When you're out on your own a lot like I am, there are times when you wonder if anyone would notice if something happened to you. But today, someone heard you. That matters." Maria turned toward him, her eyes soft with gratitude. "You heard me," he nodded gently. "I did. And I'm glad I did." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt warm and full of unspoken understanding. Maria looked down at her leg and sighed again, but this time the emotion wasn't fear, it was relief. "You were so careful with the stones," she told him. "You kept stopping every time I felt pressure or pain. You didn't rush, you didn't panic, you made me feel safe." Luke's expression softened even more. "I just wanted to make sure I didn't hurt you." "You didn't," she said. "You helped me more than I can ever explain." Luke glanced toward Dusty, then back at Maria. "Ready to keep going?" She nodded, though her legs still felt tender. He helped her stand slowly, supporting her weight with one arm while she balanced carefully. She winced a little but kept steady. Luke guided her gently to Dusty's side and helped her mount the horse again. "Hold on," he said softly. "I'll walk ahead." Maria settled into the saddle and gripped the reins lightly. Luke walked in front with one hand on Dusty's lead rope, making sure every step was slow and smooth. They traveled through a quiet stretch of land where tall grass brushed against their legs and insects buzzed lazily in the warm air. The journey to town would take a while at such a gentle pace, but neither of them minded. The slow movement gave Maria time to calm her thoughts and Luke time to ensure she was comfortable. At one point, Maria spoke again. "Luke." "Yes." "When you were moving the stones, I kept worrying one would slip and hurt you." He looked back at her with a small smile. "I was careful. But still, you didn't have to risk anything to help me." Luke shook his head. "Helping someone isn't a risk. It's what we're supposed to do for one another." Maria felt her heart warm once again. She watched him walk, noticing the quiet confidence in his stride. He wasn't a loud or proud man. He didn't talk about being brave or strong. He just acted with kindness and patience naturally, as if it was part of who he was at his core. As they continued forward, a soft breeze blew across the land, bringing the sweet smell of wildflowers with it. The sky stretched wide above them, bright blue and full of promise. Maria let her shoulders relax as she watched Luke lead the horse. Even though she still felt shaken from the accident, a new feeling had settled inside her, a gentle sense of comfort, trust, and quiet gratitude. Luke noticed her silence after a while and looked back. "You doing all right?" She nodded. "Better than before, much better." "That's good," he replied, his voice calm. They walked in peaceful silence for a while, broken only by the rustling grass and Dusty's soft steps. Maria felt safe even though she was sore and tired. The fear she had felt earlier seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the steady presence of the man walking before her. Eventually, as the sun climbed higher, Maria grew sleepy from exhaustion. Her eyelids drooped, and Luke noticed immediately. "You can rest a little," he said gently. I'll keep Dusty steady. Maria hesitated, not wanting to appear weak, but Luke's calm reassurance made her feel it was all right. She relaxed her shoulders, letting her body lean slightly forward as she closed her eyes. Dusty moved slowly and smoothly, guided by Luke's careful steps. For the first time since the stones had trapped her, Maria felt completely safe. She drifted in and out of a light rest, her mind floating between awareness and soft dreams. And each time she opened her eyes, she saw Luke walking there, steady, dependable, and attentive. The journey soon became more than just a trip to get help. It became a lesson in trust, kindness, and the quiet strength that people sometimes show without expecting anything in return. By the time they reached the edge of town, Maria felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because she would finally get medical care, and sadness because she knew their slow, gentle journey together was almost over. But even as they approached the first small buildings, she knew something had changed between them. A quiet connection had formed, unexpected, subtle, but undeniably real. And neither of them knew just how much that connection would shape the days that followed. Luke led Dusty into town at a slow and steady pace, making sure every step was smooth enough for Maria's injured leg. The small town wasn't loud or busy. It was quiet, with only a few people working outside their shops or tending to their gardens. As they passed, some people paused and looked curiously at the sight of a stranger helping a young woman on horseback. Luke didn't pay attention to their stares. His focus stayed entirely on Maria, making sure she was comfortable and safe. When they reached the doctor's small clinic near the center of town, Luke carefully helped Maria down from the horse. She tried to stand, but a sharp ache ran through her leg, and she leaned heavily against Luke for support. Without hesitation, he wrapped an arm around her back, taking most of her weight as he guided her toward the wooden steps leading into the clinic. Dusty waited patiently outside, lowering his head to graze on the patches of grass. Dr. Whitmore was an older man with kind eyes and a calm voice. He stepped forward as Luke and Maria entered, immediately noticing the way she limped. "What happened here?" he asked gently as he helped her settle onto the examination table. "She got stuck under some stones in the ravine," Luke explained. "Her leg was pinned, but I got her out. She's been in pain since." "Doctor." Whitmore nodded, his expression serious but reassuring. "Let's take a look." Luke stepped back, giving the doctor space. He watched from the corner of the room, arms crossed but eyes full of concern. Maria felt a flutter in her chest when she noticed his worried expression. She knew he had already helped her so much, and still he stood there, ready to help more if needed. The doctor examined her leg carefully, pressing gently here and there, checking for swelling or anything more serious. Maria winced a few times, but she tried her best to stay still. When the examination was finished, Dr. Whitmore wiped his hands and spoke with a calm smile. "It's not broken," he said. "Just badly bruised and strained. You'll need rest, lots of it. And you must avoid walking for a while." Maria sighed in relief, though a bit of frustration mixed in. "How long is a while?" 2 to 3 weeks, the doctor replied. "Maybe more if you're not careful." Maria's shoulders slumped. She wasn't used to sitting around. Her days were filled with work and movement. The idea of being unable to walk properly felt strange and uncomfortable. Luke stepped closer. "It's good news," he said softly. "It could have been much worse." She nodded, appreciating his encouragement even though she still felt uneasy. Dr. Whitmore gave her a pair of crutches and wrapped her leg gently to support the healing. "You'll need someone to help you for a few days," he said. "Walking on your own will be difficult." Maria opened her mouth to respond, but Luke spoke before she could. "I can help," he offered calmly, "at least until she reaches home safely." Maria looked at him with surprise. "You've already done so much. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Luke said, his voice soft but firm. "You need help and I'm here, that's all." Dr. Whitmore smiled approvingly. "Good, she'll heal faster with support." After receiving some medicine and instructions, Maria carefully stood on her crutches. Luke moved to her side immediately, ready to catch her if she stumbled. She gave him a grateful look, her cheeks warm with emotion. They left the clinic slowly, heading back toward the town square. The sunlight had softened, turning golden as afternoon approached. Maria breathed the warm air deeply, relieved to be outside again. Her leg felt heavy, but she was grateful it wasn't broken. Luke guided her to a small bench near a tree and helped her sit. "We don't have to rush," he said. "Tell me when you're ready to travel." Maria looked down at her wrapped leg. "I don't think I can ride all the way home today, it's too far." Luke nodded thoughtfully. Then we'll stay in town for the night. There's a small inn nearby. I'll get a room for you. She blinked in surprise. A room for me? What about you? I'll stay somewhere nearby. Don't worry, Luke said. I won't be far if you need anything. Maria felt a gentle wave of warmth pass through her chest. She wasn't used to someone caring for her this consistently. Working on a ranch often meant being strong and independent. Help didn't always come willingly, but Luke seemed almost drawn toward helping others as if kindness was part of his nature. After resting for a moment, Luke helped her to the inn just down the road. The innkeeper, Mrs. Porter, recognized Maria from past visits and hurried out to help. She fussed over Maria like a worried aunt, guiding her inside and settling her in a clean, cozy room on the first floor so she wouldn't have to climb stairs. Mrs. Porter brought warm soup and fresh bread. Maria thanked her and ate slowly, her body still tired from the long morning. Luke stayed nearby, sitting on a chair by the window, watching her with quiet concern. After she finished eating, he asked softly, "Do you need anything else?" Maria shook her head. "Just rest, I think." He stood and tipped his hat slightly. "I'll be around if you need me." Maria watched him leave, feeling a strange emptiness in the room after he was gone. His presence had been steady and comforting from the moment he found her. Without him, the room felt a little too quiet. She lay back on the bed, letting the softness of the pillows cradle her sore body. Even though she tried to sleep, her thoughts kept drifting back to Luke, his steady hands lifting stones, his patient voice guiding Dusty, his gentle concern every time she winced. The memory of it all wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Later that evening, while the sky outside turned shades of pink and lavender, she heard a gentle knock on the door. When she called out, Luke stepped inside with a small pitcher of water and a fresh cloth. "I thought you might want this," he said quietly. Maria smiled softly, feeling touched. "Thank you, Luke." He set the pitcher on the small table beside her bed and pulled up the chair again. "How's the leg feeling?" "It hurts," she admitted, "but it's better than being trapped under stones." Luke chuckled lightly. "That's one way to look at it." They talked for a while, simple conversation about her ranch, his travels, the quiet charm of the countryside, and the little things that made life peaceful. The more they talked, the more Maria felt her earlier fear fading away, replaced by warmth and comfort. At one point, she looked at him with gentle eyes. "Luke, if you hadn't come along," he shook his head before she could finish. "Don't think about that. What matters is you're safe now." She felt her heart flutter again. She had never met anyone like him, calm, humble, and quietly caring. Eventually, she grew sleepy. Luke noticed her eyelids growing heavy and stood. "Get some rest," he said softly. "I'll check on you in the morning." Before he left the room, she whispered, "Thank you for everything." Luke paused at the doorway, tipping his hat gently. "You don't need to thank me. I'm glad I could help." When he left, Maria settled deeper into the blankets. The ache in her leg was still there, but her heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. She drifted to sleep with thoughts of the quiet cowboy who had appeared exactly when she needed someone most. The next morning, she woke to soft sunlight spilling through the window. Her leg still hurt, but it felt more manageable. A calm, peaceful energy filled the room. Not long after she sat up, Luke knocked again before stepping inside with breakfast, warm oatmeal, fruit slices, and a small cup of tea. He set the tray on her bedside table and asked gently, "How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected," she said with a grateful smile. "That's good," he replied. "After breakfast, we can plan how to get you home without putting too much pressure on your leg." Maria nodded, touched again by his thoughtfulness. They spent another quiet hour talking, planning, and simply enjoying each other's presence. Maria found herself smiling more often than usual. Luke's calm voice and steady company made her feel safe in a way she hadn't expected. Over the next few days, Luke visited her regularly, checking on her leg, bringing meals when she couldn't walk far, and talking with her during the quiet evenings. Their conversations grew deeper, filled with laughter, shared stories, and unspoken comfort. Maria gradually healed, but something else grew even faster, an unexpected bond that neither of them had planned but both felt strongly. Their connection wasn't rushed, it wasn't dramatic. It was slow, gentle, and honest, built from trust, kindness, and the quiet moments that follow after someone saves you in more ways than one. And as the days passed, Maria realized something important. Recovery wasn't just about her leg. It was about opening her heart to the possibility that someone could care for her simply because they wanted to. Luke didn't expect anything in return. He didn't ask for anything. He just showed up, with patience, support, and a quiet warmth that made her feel seen, valued, and safe. And slowly, Maria began to understand that sometimes, the most unexpected moments bring the people we need the most into our lives. The weeks passed slowly for Maria. Each morning, she woke to the sunlight spilling into her room, and each day she followed the doctor's instructions carefully. She used her crutches to move around the small inn-room, leaning on them as she practiced gentle steps to keep her leg from stiffening too much. Every evening Luke came by as he had promised. He didn't just check on her leg. He stayed for meals, shared stories, and listened to hers. Their conversations were never rushed. They flowed like the calm river that ran near her ranch back home. Maria began to notice the small things about him, the quiet way he laughed at even the simplest jokes, the way his hands moved as he explained something, and the patient calm in his eyes that made her feel like she was safe in the world again. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't need to. His presence was steady, reliable, and comforting, and that comfort had a way of filling the empty spaces she hadn't realized were there. One afternoon, as she sat near the window letting the warm light fall on her face, she thought back to the day she had gotten stuck in the ravine. She remembered the fear, the hopelessness, and the helplessness that had consumed her. The memory made her shiver slightly, but she also remembered the relief that had washed over her when Luke had appeared. He had come quietly, without fanfare, without judgment, simply because it was the right thing to do. Maria's mind wandered to all the moments since then, the careful way he had shifted the stones, his soft voice guiding her through pain, the quiet patience as he helped her mount Dusty, the gentle way he had stayed nearby, never forcing her to do anything she wasn't ready for. She realized something important. She wasn't just healed physically. Luke's presence had healed a part of her spirit that she hadn't even known needed healing. When he came that evening, as the golden light of the sunset spilled across the room, Maria smiled softly. "Luke," she said, her voice gentle, "I've been thinking." He set down the small tray of tea he had brought and looked at her. "About what?" "About everything," she said. "About the ravine, the stones, and you. I keep replaying that day in my mind, and I realize I don't know how I would have gotten out if you hadn't come. I don't think I would have." Her voice wavered slightly, but she tried to keep it steady. Luke's expression softened. "You would have found a way," he said gently. "But I'm glad I was there. That's what matters." Maria shook her head slightly, smiling. "No, you were meant to be there. I can feel it. You didn't just save me from the stones. You saved me from feeling completely alone in the world." He sat beside her quietly, letting her words sink in. "I'm glad," he said simply. "That's the best thing I could hear." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft hum of the town outside and the distant chirping of crickets. Maria rested her hand on her lap, feeling the warmth of the setting sun. She realized that her fear of helplessness had transformed into gratitude, not just for the help she had received, but for the quiet companionship that Luke had offered so freely. As the days continued, Luke helped her prepare to return to her ranch. He carried small bags, helped her onto Dusty when necessary, and guided her steps carefully. The journey back was slow, but Maria didn't mind. She felt safe, protected, and cared for in a way that was entirely new to her. On the last evening before she would leave the inn, Maria and Luke sat outside on a bench beneath a large oak tree. The sky was painted with hues of pink and purple, and the soft evening breeze brushed her hair against her face. She looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and quiet affection filling her eyes. "I'll miss this," she said softly. Luke looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "You'll be fine at home," he said gently, "but I'll miss this too." They smiled at each other, understanding without speaking that the days they had shared had created a bond neither of them could forget. It wasn't dramatic or loud, but it was real, grounded, and deeply meaningful. The next morning, Luke helped her onto Dusty for the final leg of the journey back to her ranch. The countryside stretched out before them in golden light, familiar and welcoming. Maria's leg still ached occasionally, but it was manageable, and she felt a strong sense of independence returning. Yet she knew she wasn't alone. Luke walked beside her, guiding Dusty carefully, always there when she needed support. By the time they reached her ranch, Maria was smiling again, the pain and fear of the past weeks fading into memory. She stepped down from the horse slowly, steadying herself with the crutches, and Luke immediately offered an arm to help her balance. "You'll be fine from here," he said, his eyes gentle. "Just take it slow." Maria nodded, feeling a mixture of independence and gratitude. I know, and thank you for everything. You don't need to thank me, he said, smiling softly. I'm just glad you're safe. The next few weeks were filled with quiet days of recovery. Maria slowly resumed her daily routines, still careful with her leg, but also noticing the subtle changes in herself. She had grown more patient, more appreciative of the small moments, and more aware of the kindness people could offer. Luke visited occasionally, sometimes bringing supplies or helping with chores, sometimes just sitting quietly with her and listening. Their friendship deepened naturally, built on trust, respect, and shared experience. One afternoon, as Maria repaired a fence near the barn, she paused to watch Luke guiding a young colt back to the pasture. He moved with ease, confident and calm, yet always gentle. She realized that his kindness wasn't just in the extraordinary moments. It was in the everyday actions, the way he treated animals, people, and the world around him. Maria felt a quiet gratitude settle in her chest. She had learned something important over the past weeks. Courage and strength weren't always about facing danger alone. Sometimes, strength was about accepting help, showing kindness, and letting others care when they chose to. She walked over to Luke, leaning lightly on her crutches. You know, she said softly, I thought I was independent before. I thought I could handle everything on my own. But I see now, some of the strongest moments in life come from sharing the load, letting someone walk with you. Luke glanced at her, his expression gentle. Exactly. It's not weakness to accept help, it's human. Maria smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. I'm glad you were the one who helped me. And I'm glad I could, he replied softly. The days turned into weeks, and Maria's leg healed completely. The memory of the stones in the ravine remained vivid in her mind, but it no longer held fear. Instead, it reminded her of courage, patience, and the quiet ways people can make a difference in each other's lives. Luke and Maria continued to see each other often. Their friendship was steady, natural, and easy. They laughed together, shared stories, and worked side by side on the ranch. There were no dramatic declarations or exaggerated promises, just a slow, growing bond built on trust, shared experience, and the understanding that someone cared enough to be there when it mattered most. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Maria and Luke sat on a small hill near the ranch, watching the colors shift across the sky. Maria leaned back on her hands, feeling the soft grass beneath her, and smiled. You know, she said, the stones in the ravine taught me something important. Life can surprise you sometimes in frightening ways, but it can also bring people exactly when you need them in ways you never expected. Luke nodded, smiling. And when it does, all you need is to hold on and trust that help will come. Sometimes it's in the form of a friend. Sometimes it's in the quiet actions of someone who cares. Maria looked at him, her heart full. I'll never forget that day, or you. You won't have to, he said softly. I'll be around, that's what friends do. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the countryside, Maria realized that her story had changed. The fear of being trapped alone had transformed into gratitude for companionship, courage for recovery, and hope for the future. She knew that life would continue to bring surprises, but she also knew she could face them with strength, and that she wasn't truly alone anymore. Luke's presence had reminded her of the quiet power of kindness, patience, and trust, and those lessons, she realized, were worth more than anything else she had ever known. The sun dipped below the hills, casting a soft glow across the land. Maria and Luke sat together in silence, content with the world around them. There were no dramatic endings, no grand gestures, just two people who had found trust, safety, and quiet friendship in a world that sometimes felt uncertain. And that, Maria thought, was enough. More than enough. The ravine, the stones, the fear, it was all part of the story that had brought Luke into her life, and for that she was endlessly grateful. The bond they shared wasn't based on obligation or dramatic promises. It was built on simple acts of care, patience, and understanding, and it was strong. In the end, Maria knew one thing for certain. The moments that tested her fear and resilience had also shown her the true value of human kindness, and she would carry that lesson with her forever. The sun disappeared completely, leaving the hills bathed in gentle twilight. Maria and Luke rose slowly, ready to return to the ranch, side by side. And in the quiet of the evening, with the soft rustle of grass and the whisper of the wind, they walked forward, together, stronger and ready for whatever the days ahead might bring.